Major security concerns at one nuclear plant outside the nation's capital. Dick Cheney blasts President Obama's foreign policy, and it's Flashback Friday. All these stories and more coming up on The Rundown.
All right, stand by. 10 seconds.
Ready, camera,
Count.
Ready, camera,
Record.
3, 2, 1.
Record.
Greetings and thanks so much for joining us. This is The Rundown, where we run down some of the big stories making headlines. I'm your host, John Phillips. Joining us from Washington, D.C. is PJTV contributor Michelle Fields. And here in studio, fresh from her trip to Washington, D.C., we're joined by the one and only Tammy Bruce. Now it's time to get to the top of the rundown, and we begin with Tammy.
All righty, well, at the top of my rundown, extremely low security, that's an understatement, at a nuclear plant just 50 miles outside of Washington, D.C. The Daily Caller found that anybody could just drive through the front gate and park 555 feet away from the giant nuclear reactor. All of this without having any interaction with security. In fact, the Daily Caller had a reporter and a videographer drive through the plant twice, and both times they were never stopped. By the way, the guard booth was empty and padlocked. Got to make sure there's no guards in there. Plant officials say that they didn't get close enough to encounter the plant's security forces and did not enter a protected area. It is an extraordinary arrangement, and I know, Michelle, you live out there, but it's astounding that when you think about, especially like the Oklahoma City bombing, that all you needed is a truck. And you see the visual of the nuclear reactor, the damage that could be done, and the excuses made by the plant management that it's like almost they were arguing secret security, and that they've reestablished their security into ways that, you know, will blow you up if you get too close or into certain kinds of areas. Michelle, what do you think of this, especially since we're right next to the Capitol in this case?
Well, I think it's obviously a security risk, but I do think that they're sort of, they realize they got caught. There are some security loopholes, and this reporter and videographer caught that and exposed it. I think it's a grave concern, and hopefully now that this video is out there, they're going to feel pressure to have better security. You know,
what's frightening, Johnny, is that when confronted, there wasn't this, oh my gosh, how did this happen? Oh my goodness, it was excuses and maybe even fibbing. Mm-hmm. What do you take from all of this? Besides it being dangerous.
Well, honestly, nothing surprises me. Who would have thought that Fort Hood wouldn't be a safe place to be? Now, let's not forget, there are a lot of service members not allowed to carry weapons on them who just got back from a theater of war over in the Middle East, or maybe they were getting ready to go over there. And you'd think that they'd be safe. They thought that they were safe. And some nut from the inside came in there with an automatic weapon and shot a bunch of them. If Fort Hood isn't safe, it's not surprising to me at all that the nuclear facilities aren't safe either. You
know, I think it comes down to the agencies. We've seen now some bizarre corruption or incompetence at virtually every governmental agency, the DOJ, the IRS, the NSA, the executive branch, Congress. I mean, agencies, and now, of course, I never considered the Nuclear Regulatory Agency, but it's astounding that the nuclear plant just outside of our capital, you could just drive on into. We think that, you know, we presume that it would be more secure, but if it's this plant, this has got to be the issue with other plants.
Well,
too.
Our priorities are all screwed up as a nation. Yeah. You have to show picture ID if you're 40 years old to get a margarita at El Torito.
You would know this.
Yes.
Yes.
But you can drive up to this nuclear facility without having to identify who you are.
Yeah, well, things are going to have to change.
All right. Michelle, what do you have for us?
Former Vice President Dick Cheney takes on President Obama's foreign policy. Cheney criticized the president in a speech at the American Enterprise Institute on Wednesday. Cheney said that Obama has demonstrated his own distrust for American power as a force for good in the world. Let's play a portion of that speech.
We can hope for, and we should look for, signs of a forceful, bold, and immediate strategy to defeat ISIS. We can say already, however, that such a plan would mark an abrupt and dramatic departure from his record thus far. How could he so carelessly sacrifice America's hard-won gains in the region, walking away from friends, leaving violent enemies to fill the void? Like many in our own country, these friends of America cannot understand why the president was so insistent on withdrawing American leadership just when it was needed most. And this is the most critical measure we could apply to the President's remarks today. Any serious strategy has to include a major new commitment to restoring our nation's military preparedness. We simply cannot pursue a comprehensive strategy against terrorism. At the same time, we're sending pink slips to captains and majors in the combat zone.
So after he made this speech, the left went crazy because Cheney made the speech Wednesday morning, and then Wednesday night, of course, is when the president addressed the country about what his strategy was for ISIS. And Democrats were all over, you know, the New York Times is saying how disrespectful it was, that we're having a crisis right now, and Republicans should be united with Democrats to try to fight ISIS, that they shouldn't be criticizing the president, which is kind of funny because last time I remember when Cheney was in office and Bush, the Democrats weren't so nice. They weren't taking that advice.
I don't remember any unity. That's so weird that now they all want unity. I'm shocked, yeah. I love that this happened. I love Dick Cheney. And what the Democrats are so upset about is that it does present a juxtaposition about real leadership and seriousness. And they don't like it. They haven't been confronted for ages. Thank God for organ transplants and that this man is still alive. He also met with the GOP leadership and caucus there in the House of Representatives, talking about, you know, what they needed to do and what was required, because there hasn't been any real strong leadership in the Republican Party. And I love it that it made the Democrats go nuts. It reminds them that the Bush and Cheney era was correct, that we were correct, and that what Obama did in being the anti-Bush, which is what my Washington Times columns is about this week, this effort to be the anti-Bush and to reverse everything that Bush and Cheney did, is a disaster and has put us back into the Stone Age.
Well, one of the things that Cheney talked about there that we heard about in the clip was how this president doesn't have respect for our allies and our allies can't trust him. And to me, that's the Chicago-style politics working its way into the foreign policy realm. There's a guy who's coming to speak to the Los Angeles County GOP by the name of Joseph Cao, who was a congressman, a Vietnamese Republican that represented a very black district in Louisiana. It was the William Jefferson district. After William Jefferson went to jail, he won the special election. And he was the one Republican that voted for Obamacare.
That's right, that's right.
President Obama lobbied him a lot. This guy
said... That was the bipartisanship, was Mr. Cao.
Yes, exactly. And so how did President Obama repay his ally? He went into the district and cut an ad for Cao's opponent, because it's a black district and he didn't want an Asian Republican representing it. But that's how he repays a friend.
That's right.
The one guy that let him declare the bill a bipartisan bill, he screwed as soon as he had the opportunity. And that's the same way he looks at our allies in the Middle East. That's the same way he looks at our allies worldwide. Nobody can trust this guy. Not Democrats in the Congress, not Republicans in the Congress, and not foreign countries.
Well, it's a moral cravenness is what it is at every single level, I think.
All right, we'll have more on that, I'm sure, as the situation unfolds. But now it's time to move to the top of my rundown, where Latino journalist and Univision anchor Jorge Ramos takes on Bill O'Reilly. Why? Well, Ramos told the host of Fox's O'Reilly Factor that he's not fair and balanced. Ramos also said that O'Reilly is tougher on Obama than Bush. Let's go ahead and take a look at the exchange.
I've seen your show lately, doing my homework. You've destroyed President Barack Obama.
If President Obama does not formally declare war on Muslim terrorism, he's doing all Americans a great disservice.
Almost every single show you criticize President Barack Obama, and you didn't do the same with President George W. Bush.
Yes, I did. I was hard on Bush, and I was hard on Obama.
I saw one of your interviews.
I saw your interview. I saw your interview with Obama. I saw your interview with Obama.
And then I'll tell you about.
Would you say that you were hard on him?
I think I was.
Yeah. Okay. Why? Why were you hard on him?
Because he promised immigration and he just didn't deliver.
Okay.
He didn't
now I'm hard on him now because he is botching it as far as worldwide terrorism is concerned.
I've seen you criticize President Obama, yeah. But you didn't do the same with President Bush.
Sure I did. I
saw the interview. It was weak.
Which one?
I saw the one, remember that you asked him what had happened to the weapons of mass destruction.
Right.
And, you know, he told you, I don't know. And you let him get away with that.
I did let him get away with it in the sense that I made it quite clear that he and his administration weren't effectively waging the war in Iraq.
The same way that you're treating President Obama. That's what I'm saying.
All right. That's, again, in your opinion. Now we're in a position where, and you have to know this, 70% of the American people think that the country's going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, but that's
so what are you telling me that I shouldn't be hard on the chief executive?
No, I mean, you can do whatever you want, but that's not fair and balanced. I mean, if you really want to be fair and balanced, you will have to be as strong against a Republican president as with a Democratic president. If you were not.
All right, Michelle, I think they're both half right and half wrong. Here's where Jorge Ramos is half right. He's half right in that Bill O'Reilly is not fair and balanced, but Bill O'Reilly is not a straight news program. Bill O'Reilly is a commentary program. O'Reilly likes to bill himself as a fair and balanced guy, but he's not a conservative, or at least not someone that I would call a conservative. I'd say he leans to the right. So in that point, Jorge Ramos is right. Here's where he's wrong. The Spanish media is probably one of the more slanted mediums on the planet because they take an advocacy position, particularly on the idea of amnesty or illegal immigration, but they don't present it as commentary, as Fox News does with the O'Reilly Factor or Hannity or any of the other opinion shows. They refer to it as the straight news. So in that respect, O'Reilly is at least honest about his biases, and Fox is honest about the biases of their opinion people. Univision and the Spanish language media, they call it straight news.
You are absolutely right, John. Absolutely. And I thought it was just a silly argument to begin with, because it's not as if Bill O'Reilly has ever said that he was a straight news guy. He has a personality, and his whole show is based upon his opinion and his take on what's going on. So to have this discussion on, oh, you're not fair and balanced, well, look, he has his opinions, and he's saying it how it is. That's his whole shtick. I do think, though, I actually like Jorge Ramos. I think that
I do too,
you're
actually.
right in the sense that they talk about immigration reform as just one way, straight news, not as if this is, they don't say, oh, what are the repercussions of immigration reform? They never talk about that on Univision. But I like him in the sense that sometimes he's willing to go after the administration. When it came to Fast and Furious and Eric Holder, he was on that story when a lot of other Latino reporters were backing away and liberals. So I do like him, but I thought this discussion was kind of silly.
All right, you're a Fox News employee. He's going after your shop. What's your take?
Well, look, I mean, what I find fascinating is the presumption that the fair and balanced is internal at Fox versus the construct of having to present an idea or opinions that the rest of the mainstream media ignore. So you're actually getting opinions that everyone else is ignoring, or they're being partisans. And look, at Univision, yeah, they might go after the administration on occasion, but they are social advocates for certain social frameworks. And that, of course, is not balanced either. And they don't present it, as you've noted, as that's the case. So Fox, internally, you're looking at a variety of different opinions, probably, unlike even at Univision, the most divergent kind of opinion base within the network itself, and then providing the balance for the rest of the mainstream news, which is even at least giving the conservative or the libertarian point of view some kind of hearing. So look, I mean, if Jorge Ramos has nothing to worry about, all the other mainstream media is still covering for Barack Obama. God forbid should there be one unit, one element, one host who is honest. And you saw that one clip with how O'Reilly put it. It's like, you know, this is, in his opinion, what O'Reilly thinks Obama needed to do, and that if Obama didn't do it, it would be a disservice. I mean, I think that that's pretty fair.
Well, and let's just for a minute say that Fox is a right-wing organization, although I would say they're right of center. I wouldn't call them necessarily overtly right-wing.
Right, of course.
If you're a right-wing organization, you don't employ Shepard Smith and Greta Van Susteren and Alan Colmes.
Yeah.
Within the right, there is a fierce debate going on right now. The difference between a Rand Paul and a Mike Huckabee, you could drive a truck through. There's no debate going on the left right now. You don't see Rachel Maddow and Chris Matthews go at it. You don't see Rachel Maddow and Ed Schultz go at it because they agree on 9 out of 10 things. But if you were to take the Rand Paul and the Mike Huckabee, well, they disagree on just as much as they agree.
Yeah, that's because on the left, all of their energy is spent in maintaining the collective, the notion of the collective. It's like Obama and Obamacare. It's the larger idea, but nobody ever gets into the details of how to make those ideas happen. On the right, you're dealing with actual, distinct, discrete ideas within which people can disagree. On the left, they're not built that way. When it comes right down to the brass tacks, they have no new ideas. Barack Obama is a recycling of the ideas from 30 to 60 years ago. There's nothing new even about Barack Obama.
Well, they haven't really changed since the New Deal.
No, they haven't, because there's no there. In order to be able to deal with new ideas, you've actually got to be able to deal with the details, and that's why you see divisions on the right, because people have ideas. On the left, you don't, because what they have is anger and victimhood and entitlement.
All right. Now it's time for Flashback Friday, and Tammy, you're up first.
Well, on this Flashback Friday, considering this is the anniversary week of the September 11th attacks, my story is a good reminder that it was back in 1814, actually September 13th, 1814, when Francis Scott Key wrote a poem, which is later set to music. And in 1931, it becomes America's national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. Key was inspired by a lone American flag still flying over Fort McHenry at daybreak during the War of 1812. A beautiful poem. The music, it's certainly more than appropriate, but the notion of the bombs, that the flag was still there, the emotional relationship with that imagery really sets into our hearts, I think, who we are as Americans and why that imagery, the imagery of the flag and what we stand for, remains so important.
Your old pal Bill Press doesn't like the song. He thinks we should replace it with God Bless America.
Yeah, well, so suddenly the church and state, he doesn't want separated. It's a miracle. I like both songs, but this song reminds, I think, Americans of our military prowess even then and the importance of defending this country.
All right. My Flashback Friday story involves former president. It was back in 1960 on September 12th when President John F. Kennedy said he does not speak for the Roman Catholic Church and that the church doesn't speak for him. Let's go ahead and take a look at that announcement.
But because I am a Catholic, and no Catholic has ever been elected president, the real issues in this campaign have been obscured, perhaps deliberately, in some quarters less responsible than this. So it is apparently necessary for me to state once again, not what kind of church I believe in, for that should be important only to me, but what kind of America I believe in. I believe in an America where the separation of church and state is absolute, where no Catholic prelate would tell the president, should he be Catholic, how to act, and no Protestant minister would tell his parishioners for whom to vote.
And then 50 some odd years later, Mitt Romney gave the same speech about the Mormon Church.
Yeah, look, even just hearing that brief segment reminds us, when everyone talks about the current president being so eloquent, is there's a difference when somebody really feels it. At the same time, we had no idea how much the Catholic Church didn't affect his life when it comes to his own personal behavior. If we only knew how much he didn't take his faith seriously, maybe things would have been a little different.
All right, Michelle, you're up.
On this Flashback Friday, it was 20 years ago when some little rascals took over the big screen. It was back in 1994 when the movie hit theaters. Take a look at the cast then, and now look at the comparison. A number of gags and subplots in the film were taken from the original Little Rascals shorts. So they got together and took a photo of them now.
I love these flashback photos. You know who just did this?
Let's get back to those posters, because that is fascinating.
Yeah,
get back.
There
Can we have
go.
the
Look at that.
The dog looks great. The dog hasn't changed a bit. Look at him. The dog is exactly the same.
They just did one of these for Married with Children because Katie Sagal just got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. They all look great.
Yeah, thank goodness.
Oh,
Everybody
nice.
Pictures, yeah. All right, that's going to do it for today's show. What do you think about our picks for Flashback Friday? And what about the non-existent security at that nuclear plant outside of Washington, D.C.? We want to know what you think, so be sure to leave your comments in the comment section below. I'm John Phillips for Tammy Bruce joining me here in Los Angeles and Michelle Fields in the nation's capital. Thanks so much for watching The Rundown.